right, good afternoon, folks. This is Faris with TwT. This video is going to mark the third video of the weekend chart preparation series on YouTube, where I just go over tickers that are likely to give us some chart setups into the upcoming week, and which ones have the most probability and potential, right? So the highest chance of going from point A to point B, right, and actually making us money, and then a few that could actually fly or drop substantially, okay? So first we're going to kick it off with futures, as usual, just go over what some of these bigger names are looking like into the upcoming week, and then we'll break it down into individual groups and momentum plays, okay? And just to be clear, I kind of say this as a disclaimer before every video that I put out for Trade with Tex. This isn't like a standard day in the Trade with Tex chat room. We go over these, pre-market and after the bell, but this is a different routine that we do on weekends, and it's not supposed to teach you different methods. It's supposed to show you what is going to give opportunity. Okay, so it's not necessarily an educational video, more so geared towards what will make us money, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Okay, so let's kick it off with the Nasdaq here. Again, one of my favorite lists that we've had lately, but we're going to start it off with boring old futures. So I'm looking at NQ here, and the main time frames that I wanted to mention are just the daily and the monthly. We'll zoom into the hourly to just show you what those key levels look like just a lot closer. But the reason why we're looking at the monthly today is because this week marked the end of May, right? It's crazy that we're already going into summer here, but basically the monthly just gives you an idea of what is happening on the bigger picture. And normally when you're looking at larger time frames, they're going to indicate larger moves, okay? So first things first, just zoom into this daily chart here. As you can see, it was a pretty straightforward week for the Nasdaq. And last weekend we talked about how we were bullish going into this week, but the risk to reward was not ideal, right? In the sense that normally when you were looking at something that's trending like this, right, you want to get in on the swing lows and then exit on the swing highs, right? You don't just want to buy. So in this case this week, we had a lot of shakeouts, and that is a little bit scary to me, not from a doomsday perspective, not saying we're going to crash or anything, but just as somebody who needs to make money on a daily and weekly basis from the markets, that makes it a lot trickier. So going into this week, I'm a little bit hesitant, just like last weekend, because it's not the ideal risk to reward. However, we did put in a higher high and a higher low. This is a very simple mention that I'm sure a lot of you guys have already noticed, right? Basically, that means that the trend is still intact. So trend is still bullish, right? We had decent volume for a short week, and that's mainly because of all the Trump speak and Powell coming out and saying a couple of things, but we cleared the previous resistance. And I know this looks like 95.65 was the big resistance that I'm focused on here, but basically the level that was giving us a really hard time for the past week and a half or so was 94.97. So in terms of the trend, we know that the trend is still intact. In terms of key levels, we not only moved above 94.97, right, which is this level here, but we actually closed above it. So from a supply and demand standpoint, it shows that the sellers, the supply, is drying up a little bit, and that bulls are not only in control, but fully in control, okay? Just based off that closing price, right? And if you don't believe me, you can look at the weekly candlestick as well. In terms of resistance, we've cleared this level. I'm still going to keep it up on the chart, but now the key level that I'm going to be looking at going into next week is that level that I mentioned briefly, 95.65.5. It's not as meaningful, but it is still significant in the sense that that's a closer resistance level that we just barely stayed above by the close, okay? So I'm not really looking at this high. This was just an overnight high. This was the high that had plenty of volume behind it on Thursday. Okay, so 95.65.5 was the resistance. Now it's just below the price. The other level overhead, believe it or not, is 9,700, and then the all-time high, which makes me a little bit skeptical, right? I think with the way things are going right now on a macro scale, you can't really justify all-time highs, but price is price, right? It's telling us that we're moving up there. So 9,700 would technically be the next target area. In terms of support, so these are the two resistance levels. In terms of support, we have a really sneaky key level here that you might miss. So obviously, first things first, we have the 8 EMA on the daily. And again, this is all my personal opinion, but I love using that moving average. Worked like a charm all week. Defended, 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 defended. Okay, it's that pinkish purplish line there. So that is still support, and that's going to move up with price, right? Because price is above it. And then we have this tricky level below at 93.83 point, I think it's 7.5. I wrote over it. But what this looks like on the hourly is this. Okay, we have resistance here, and then way above at 9,700. Okay, and then we have support here, and the 8 EMA is right about here, roughly. All right, so 8 EMA is going to be the first level of support, but this level here, I didn't think it was that significant on Thursday, but it defended it big time right before the close, and it defended it earlier in the day as well. You can't really see it, but it did it there. And obviously, this is a level that buyers have been defending time and time again, because we tested it 4 or 5 times. Every time resulted in at least a 50-point bounce. Okay, so kind of a tricky chart going into this week, because we have a moving average that is moving up with price, and then we have a level that you might not be spotting because it's not one of those levels that everybody's talking about on social media. Okay, so here and here are the support levels, and then there and up there are resistance. Okay, since the trend is intact, next target's going to be 9,700. It's a little ways away, but ideally we hit that within the next week or so. Okay, realistically we could hit that within 3 days, but depends on where we open over the weekend. Okay, and the last thing I'll say for the Nasdaq, and it relates directly to the S&P, the monthly chart, right, is still bullish, meaning that we had a very strong monthly candle in April. Everything there is pointing to a bounce, right? Mainly the closing price, but everything there is pointing to a bounce. And now, based off of this, we have an inside up rotation, which means that we had this candlestick almost within the range of the other one, right? With the S&P, it was within the range. That's why I'm saying inside up. But we've broken that high. So there's the up, right? If we broke the low, it would have been inside down, would have been bearish. But we broke that high. So the big picture is saying that we're moving higher. Okay, and if we look at the S&P, it's the same thing. We're not going to go too in depth with this chart. But the S&P is a little bit cleaner in terms of just having an inside candle within that range. And now we've broken that swing high. Okay, this one has its work cut out for it, though. It hasn't been performing as well. All right, so daily chart still bullish. Not the best risk to reward, but it is indicating a move higher. And then the monthly is saying the same thing it was saying a couple of weeks ago, but now it's actually closed out. Okay. Now, I wanted to mention oil very briefly because oil was actually a big moneymaker for me this week. And just the trade with text chat in general, right? We play whatever's in play, whether that's futures or options or common stock, but crude oil came alive a couple of times and really just surged. And it doesn't look like it on the daily chart, but right before the close twice, it just jumped an easy 50 ticks, right? Which even with a small position is $500. So a lot of money to be made here, but more importantly, on the daily chart here for crude, we are breaking above a pretty big area. And we talked about this in the last video pretty briefly, right? But basically oil had reclaimed a couple of big long-term levels, right, in the 33s. And we said that if it held the 33s, we would go to the 36s. The main reason I'm going over this chart right now is because we still haven't hit the 36s, but oil put in a higher high this week, right? It broke above this little box that it has. Call it a box, call it a flag, whatever you want, right? But if we zoom in, you can see it's been ranging between the low 30s and the high 34s. And then Friday was the first day we closed above this. So based off of this, oil should be able to hit that target at 36.35, maybe even before we open on Monday, as ridiculous as that sounds. And then big picture, it has room to 40, but I'll give you some short-term fib targets because obviously that you're not going to buy oil or the ETF or whatever and hold it for $40, right? You're going to take profits along the way like a disciplined trader. So in this case, you would have these fib extensions that I already drew up in preparation. 36.86 be the next one. Okay, and let me erase 40. Let me put it up here. And then the last one would be 37.54. Okay, so this is the first target. Should hit very quickly on crude. And then, of course, the big target for the week would be $40 if it can get enough momentum. All right, I'm a believer. I think it could, but $40. And the reason why I'm saying this is going to be fast is because we have this big gap to fill from the original Saudi Arabia and Russia headline. Okay, whether you follow oil or not, this is pretty opportunistic to say the least. You could trade ETFs off of it, options, futures, whatever is in your comfort zone. Okay, so 4 targets, 36.35 being the first one, 40 being the bold, far away one. Let's see if it can hit. Okay, now this is the part that I'm sure everybody watches for, because now we'll get into individual stocks and why I think they'll go from point A to point B, or really what the chart setup is, right? So for the Nasdaq, the chart setup was just a steady trend. For crude oil, we have a flag breakout or triangle breakout, whatever you want to call it. And there are 2 sectors that really, well, I should say industries and sectors that really stuck out this past week. One of which was financials, right? The old fins. They've been beaten down, rightfully so, right? These banks kind of deserve to be put in the ground a little bit, but they've been beaten down and now they're starting to make a comeback. And I hold 2 of them in my long-term portfolio. I hold Goldman and JP Morgan, but for the most part, all of them are setting up. And I picked my favorite, which was the same favorite from a couple weeks back, Wells Fargo. Okay, so that's the ticker that I'm going to be watching for the financial sector this week. And this is something that really goes with what I was saying about the comfort zone. You want to identify a group or 2 that you think will do well for the upcoming week. It's not a bold prediction. It's solely based off the chart. Okay, so the reason why I'm saying financials is because they outperformed very well on Monday. Doesn't look like it, but it was a big day. And then they put in a higher swing high. So this was the previous swing high, moved higher. So just basic trend analysis, right? We got relative strength and we got some more bullish activity, clearly, right? A higher high. So I picked my favorite one, Wells Fargo, just because it's been given a lot of good day trade action. It's not your favorite of which one's going to make the biggest comeback. It's just in terms of which one can give you the most intraday opportunity, right? Because obviously I don't even hold this one long term. But basically we're using the same fibs from 2 weeks back, if you missed that video, drawn from 30.75 down to 22, right? Basic Fibonacci retracements right there. And that gives us a really easy view of what's going on here, right? Because we've crossed over the 50% fib, which signals a short-term trend shift, right? Meaning that bulls are starting to reestablish this trend, okay? And obviously when that's the case, we're going to immediately go to the 61.8%. We already did. We actually went a little bit higher and got rejected. So first takeaway here for Wells Fargo is that we have support just below at 26.32. That's the key fib. So that really would be the ideal entry, which isn't that far off, meaning that Monday or Tuesday, you could probably already get in. Okay, whether it's first swing or a day trade, there's definitely opportunity there. First target overhead would be this 50-day SMA, but in reality, it should just magnet up to the 61.8. So that would be 27.37. Okay, that 61.8% fib. And then above that would be the previous high from just this week, and that's 28.26. So this is support. We have resistance and resistance. So support, resistance, resistance. Nice and simple. Remember, your job isn't to nail a huge breakout or say Wells Fargo is going to $30 this week, because actually the last time, so 2 weeks ago, when I talked about Wells Fargo bouncing off these lows, so it was around here roughly, right? I had one comment on the video and then 2 people tweet at me. It's just Trade with Tex on Twitter if you want to follow or chat with me sometime. I'm really active on it, but tweeted at me and they said, Wells Fargo going to $30 this week or going to $28 this week. Obviously that didn't happen, why would you even throw that out there, right? Your job is to make money on it, not predict exactly where it's going to go in a very specific time frame. You want a general idea, and then you wait for that intraday opportunity to execute, right? To actually get in. So my job isn't to predict whether or not it's going to break through 28.26. I think it's likely. My job is just to get an idea of when it could revisit that level, or if it could. Okay, so for Wells Fargo, support at 26.32. That's a really tight risk. And then reward at 27.37, 28.26. Okay, options worked well last time, but obviously you can see there's enough range here if you want to play common stock. All right, again, just based off your comfort zone. So because financials have been hot and bouncing back with a higher high, watching Wells Fargo this week. Okay, the other industry that really stuck out was just semiconductors, right? If you guys missed it, one of the afternoon headlines, I said that, I was watching Tesla and a couple others last week, but headlines just completely overshadowed everything. This is a good example. Micron, MU, right? Pretty big company, increased their guidance, right? Out of nowhere, and significantly increased it. So what that did is that drove a lot of semiconductors higher, and they closed at the highs for the week as well. Okay. So for me, that puts a lot of these on the radar. Your job is just to narrow it down to 1 to 2. So the more exciting ticker to trade for me is NVDA, NVIDIA. One that was in the bull scans that I'm just going to mention is Qualcomm. If you're okay with slower movers, or if you want to swing trade, this chart looks better than NVIDIA. I'm just looking at this for day trades. Okay. So first things first, SOX is just the index ETF that I refer to. This and SMH are good ways to look at the bigger picture for semiconductors as a whole. First thing that stuck out, it has a gap to fill. So realistically, for whatever semiconductor that you're looking at, your target is going to be 1891.05. Okay. And I'm actually going to set an alert for that. Right, I'm going to set an alert for that, because then when that triggers, I know that we're probably going to start seeing some of these names exhaust just short term. Okay, so I'm going to create the alert, 1891.05, mark at or above, and then I'm just going to say gap filled. That way I know exactly why that alert triggered. I can just check my phone or my platform, and I'm fully aware. Okay, so we're already filling that gap. We haven't hit it yet, meaning should just magnet right up there. So the name that I'm looking at to kind of take advantage of this move is NVIDIA. If we're just going to magnet right up to resistance, I have to annotate where the NVIDIA resistance is, and pretty easy read, 363.5. Okay, I'm actually not going to mention anything else for this chart. I don't want you guys to overthink this. All I'm saying is NVIDIA should be 8 points higher within the next day or two. Okay, it's not my job to predict whether or not that will break. Honestly, I think it's going to have some trouble with it. But the last thing I'll say is just with relation to this key level, notice I'm not taking this high, because that high is not the big resistance. It's the same thing I talked about in the last video. If we run up to a resistance level and get rejected, and then we run up a little bit above it, but clearly get rejected in that same area again, this is a supply zone, right? It's not just this flat out key level giving us resistance. It's a supply zone as a result of this level, okay? So basically for NVIDIA, we're taking the prior level that held us down as our sell zone where we would want to take some profits, not just the 52-week high, which is a very common misconception. I cannot stand when people just chase 52-week highs constantly. Okay, it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine if you can't tell, but 363.5 is a target. Looking for a move from semiconductors this week, not just NVIDIA. Okay, so what we've gone over so far, just to recap, Nasdaq, decent trend. Crude oil, breakout. Wells Fargo, we're just looking point A to point B. Okay, NVIDIA, 363.5. That's going to be our target. So a couple of names here that you probably recognize. Now for the more exciting stocks, the ones that move very quickly and are lower probability, higher potential, right? So these are stocks that you only want to trade if they hit the exact price that you want. So for these three, very important to define exactly what you want. The three that I'm going to mention here are ZS, GAN, and NERV. Just to give you an idea, this stock had very good earnings, and there are a couple of really good things going for it. Intermediate term, so like 3 to 6 months roughly. This stock here has a low float and had news, so it's a lot riskier, but when it does move, damn, it can really get going. This stock impressed me this week, to say the least. And we traded it like 3 or 4 times. And then NERV is a beaten down biotech. This is horrible company, right? Just be aware of that if you're trading it. But they do still have a little bit of value. And after this trial failure that they had this past week, bounced a couple of times. So there's one big level that I'm going to watch for just a dead cat bounce, just for quick day trades. But don't fall in love with any of these. They're just point A to point B movers, okay? So ZS, right off the bat, you guys are probably aware of this if you've read any of the Trade with Text blog, and it's just tradewithtext.com/blog. That's mainly educational posts, but we talk about a couple of the watch lists that we maintain in the chat room on there. One of them is the 90 to 120 watch list, and another is the strong earnings, which a lot of people have different variations of this one. It's basically just a stock that's breaking out on multiple time frames with a strong earnings report, right? They had great results, they beat expectations, yada, yada, yada. The 90 to 120 is a really interesting concept, and again, this video is all my opinion, but I firmly believe in this strategy. It essentially says that once a stock has reached 90 bucks for the first time ever, and they have growing financials, it will go to 120 quickly because of institutional buying pressure, okay? And again, that's pretty controversial. I firmly believe that because I've played it a bunch of times over, probably about 2 dozen, okay? NVDA was one of the best examples for that, by the way. So this stock joins both of those watch lists, which means that day trades and swing trades, we gotta watch it for the next couple weeks. Have to, okay? You cannot ignore it. So it ran up huge on Friday. We played it, I think, twice for day trades, and it stopped at 98.38. Okay, so it's getting a breakout on all time frames. You can see that, right? This was the prior all-time high. I'm not one to chase highs, okay? But short term, the next target would just be a fib overhead at 101.42. Okay, big picture, we're looking for a push to 120. So that could take between 1 and 6 months to get up there. Okay, there are times where I've hit a stock, or I've seen a stock hit that within a week. There are times where it took the full 6 months. Okay, but that's the longest it should take to get up there. So basically for ZS, I'm looking for a break over this area, whether it's Monday or Friday or a month from now. And that'll give us 101.42. Okay, that would be the first target. All right. Now for GAN, I mentioned that this is a low floater. Great range this week. Positive news. It's going on day 3, which makes me a little bit hesitant, but basically it's simple, right? It got rejected a bunch of times at 22.42 this past week, so that's the level I want it to break above. Okay, and a bunch of times, I'm referring to Friday, not just this past week, but Friday specifically. If it breaks that, really simple setup, we're just going to go up to the next fib, up at 24.12. Okay, you might look at this game plan and think, oh my God, this guy's insane. He's really just talking out of his ass. But in reality, right, I made the same game plan on Thursday when it formed this hideous daily candlestick. Right? There's no getting around that. It was very ugly. I said, this thing still has potential, right? It might not hit, but if it does, if it breaks 20 bucks, we're going to fly up to the 22s. And that's exactly what happened. So my theory here isn't, oh, I was right before, I'm going to be right again. But basically, if it sets up, don't hesitate to take the trade. Okay, so 22.42 is the key break. Notice I've already set the price alert there. All right, and last but not least, we'll wrap this thing up. NERV failed a pretty big trial, lost a lot of value, and rightfully so. Took a beating on Friday, but it made a couple of huge comebacks. And more specifically, it doubled off the low, which is not anything to ignore. So it has massive long-term support at 407. This dates back multiple years. It's not just this year, but essentially for NERV, if it reclaims 407, we can zoom it into what the 5-minute looks like. Then our first target area would just be this initial open, and that's at 450. Okay, the low of this opening candle, 450. And actually, I should have that drawn. This is where the weekend prep helps. It helps me fill in the cracks if I've missed anything. So 407 is the key reclaim. That's what we want to happen. We've established that. Wait for that to actually happen before taking any type of a trade. And if it can base above that, 450 is the first target, and that's a pretty modest one. More than likely, it's going to go to 5. Okay. Again, I don't like this company. I just like trading the stock. So penny stock traders, add this one to your list. And the last thing I'll say, and we'll wrap this up, please, 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 if you are scanning on the weekends and you're trying to implement this chart preparation into your kind of weekly habits and routine, please set price alerts. It's such a simple thing, and it's one of those things in the trading world where, you know, this is a job at the end of the day, and there is no repercussion, there is no consequence to setting a price alert, right? It's not going to hurt the job that you do. It's not going to slow the job that you do. It just makes you more aware of what's going on and helps you do it more efficiently. So whether you're using TD Thinkorswim or Speed Trader or you know, any one of the other big brokerages, make sure to set price alerts. Okay, if you don't end up taking the trade, that's fine. At least you're aware that it's set up. Okay. Oh, and actually, one final thing. Zoom is reporting on Tuesday. Zoom, you know, the hot stock that ran up to the 170s. I probably won't be trading it before then, but just a heads up for anybody that's holding it or watching it. Okay, it reports Tuesday after the bell. That's really the only earnings report that I care about this week, to be honest. Okay, here's Zoom, just so you could see. All right, but on that note, guys, I'm going to leave you to it. If you have anything else to add, you can honestly just comment on the video below. I will be doing these weekend prep videos 3 out of every 4 weeks, I decided, because normally for the Bowser Report, which is another business that I produce a lot of content for, I do a lot of the work for that 1 week out of the month, just doing a lot of extra research and whatnot, so that'll be next week. So next week there will not be a video, but if you like this one, like and subscribe to the channel. Hopefully I can help you guys make some money this week and we can all bank together. And more importantly, we've gotten a lot of people signing up on tradewithtex.com. If you want to take it for a spin, you can try a week for free. Right? It's $50 a month normally for alerts, educational videos, a full library of thousands of videos. But if you want to take it for a spin, you can't afford the $50, then sign up for the free week. I don't care. I'm happy to help you guys. All right. So have a good weekend. Make some money for me on Monday, and I will talk to you next time around. All right. Take it easy, folks.